a flash of light coming from the sun. There's something called a coronal mass ejection. Instead of just bouncing straight off our magnetic field, can interact with it, and some of it can slip through. And that is potential cause for concern because...
You're about to scare the shit out of everyone. So this is Sophie Burley. She started studying in cosmology and space weather, done a dissertation on it, and joined the European Space Agency, helping to predict and analyse the phenomena of space weather and how it might impact us here on Earth.
The rise in commercial satellites is a huge risk now. Fire on Earth, bad. Fire in space, really bad.
Why is it really bad?
So,
are the phenomena we're seeing across the Pacific and all these hearings in Congress going to lead us to the fact that there actually are aliens? Well, Sophie's been well positioned to find out.
I think it would be crazy if there weren't not.
The guy that inspired you into the industry, Brian Cox.
Yeah.
You've actually now had the pleasure of working with him, I believe.
Yes. Yeah, I have.
I got to ask Sophie what the most profound impact was that all of those astronauts spoke about as they left our planet.
For most of them, they said they going to space made them feel...
It's almost like the hairs on my arms are going up, like I'm thinking about. Sophie, nice to meet you.
And to meet you.
I know.
Yeah, I'm excited to chat.
I know, it's great. Well, but we were talking, weren't we? We were talking about having a little chat maybe a couple of weeks ago, just exploring some stuff. And then we started to get onto the subject of space weather. And I was like, whoa. We need to meet and talk about this on a podcast. So here we are. Good. Where did it all begin? Where were you growing up?
So I grew up in Dubai. I was born out in Dubai and I lived there until I was 18 years old. Dubai always felt like somewhere where everything's possible. You know, if we're going to start doing building, we're going to have like the biggest buildings. If we're going to do a business, say we're going to make it happen. I feel like Dubai has always felt like that. And so that weirdly, I think has ingrained in me the ability to think a little bit like that for myself. So when I left Dubai, I wasn't thinking like, oh, you know, studying astrophysics in order to see where that could take me isn't a weird decision. It felt quite natural. It's like, okay, cool, let's see what's going to happen because it's probably going to be something exciting because most things I'd seen around me building and like developing were like that.
And they're continuing on that trajectory, aren't they? I mean, I very, very much feels futuristic now when you look through the blocks of buildings over the top of the canals and waterways there. It really does feel like something out of a kind of a science fiction movie from 10, 15, 20 years ago.
I honestly, I really love, and one of my like sort of mini side hobbies is when you're watching sci-fi films to know when they very clearly used a picture of Dubai as their basis for forming their VFX. You're like, oh my God, I know that building. Like, oh, that's definitely the metro. Like they've definitely used an image and then sort of superimposed extra technologies and flying cars. And totally Dubai, I think because they were able to build something from the ground up, has been built with the future in mind and thinking about like, oh, how can we, connect up these areas of the city really usefully? And they're always trying to think like, how can they almost like future-proof the city? And when it comes to like, I kind of recently in April went to visit, I went to Dubai AI Week, hosted at the Future Foundation and at the Museum of the Future. So they are like, the future is like sort of Dubai's brand, I'd say. Like they're really hot on AI. It's just become compulsory in schools out there to teach it really young. Yeah,
they've given everyone a subscription to ChatGPT for free.
Yeah.
They're embracing it.
They know that is going to be a huge leap in innovation, and they know that if they can give it to as many people in their city as possible, then they're going to benefit from it in the long run.
I read the other day that there's someone saying that actually there's a good chance that when we stop buying oil from the Middle East, we're going to start buying AI.
Really?
Yeah, just because of their massive investment, and they're just ahead of it. And it's the right thing. It's so obvious it's the future, and just love to see the British government lean into it with as much velocity and momentum that so many other countries are. We were talking about earlier when we were set about just jumping towards the future instead of taking incremental steps. What does the future look like? Let's just start building that.
Yeah, no, that's 100% what they're doing. They're like, okay, at some point they can't rely on oil. Oil will run out. That's what we know. It's finite. So they're like, okay, what do we want our future to look like? Who do we want the average person in Dubai to be by then? and how do we achieve that? And they just go for it. They're like, okay, if we want to have the next like generation of Silicon Valley tech entrepreneurs, we need to make sure that they can, you know, grow and thrive here. So they're just like, okay, we'll give everyone AI and see how. I mean, obviously, I don't know if that's their game plan, but it definitely feels like they're thinking 4 steps ahead.
Become AI native. Become an AI native nation. Get there first. It's a great idea. It's interesting, actually. I've just realized something, that what we were talking about earlier off camera, and you've just mentioned it again there, is about like leaping into the future. I guess because of your obsession and passion over space, you can only think about that really because you're always thinking about what future impact is. You're never really thinking, very little of it is about the current.
Yeah.
You're thinking about the risks of the future or the opportunities of the future.
Yeah, no, that's not something I'd even really thought about. I knew that I have been for almost forever been kind of obsessed with the future.
Yes.
And yeah, that probably is all linked because in space, so many of these projects take years to happen. Like, you know, you think about the first probes to reach planets that are miles and miles away. That's someone's whole career, not just career, potentially multiple generations of, you know, careers working all to see one vision. And so people in the space industry are always thinking about like, okay, if I do this piece of work here, what groundwork does that then lay for the future work to take place? So yeah, it probably is that. And when I think about space, I definitely, at least when I first started out, thought, okay, I'm going to start in space research, and at some point I'm going to be able to just go visit these planets. And it hasn't quite worked out that way. But you know what, we're closer to that than we were when I started.
Yes.
You know, maybe we're not going to visit Europa, but we are planning missions to Europa, and you know, and there are planets further at the edge of our solar system that we are starting to visit with probes that we just wouldn't have tried before. So we're definitely heading that way, and we are heading off planet, off world. It feels
closer than ever before, doesn't it?
Yeah.
There's no doubt. And so you study astrophysics, and then how do you get your first opportunity from there and into working in the space field?
I applied for what was then called a Young Graduate Trainee Scheme, but I believe it's called the Young Professional Trainee, or just what is now called the ESA Graduate Trainee Scheme. So I think they've realised that some people who are going into their career line are not straight out of uni. They've done other things before.
Okay.
So they've removed the young.
Yep.
And what that meant was I had done my master's in the area of space weather. And they had a graduate trainee role that was very specifically helping the Space Weather Office with validating and verifying, so like sort of checking the reliability of their forecasting tools for space weather.
Okay.
So I applied for that and moved over to Darmstadt in Germany.
Amazing.
So I've gone from Dubai to, I was Lancaster for university up in the north, over to Darmstadt, Germany, which is really kind of out in the middle of nowhere. Yeah, so it was a bit of a change up, and having spoken and still really speaking little to no German was a bit scary, but
overwhelming. Yeah,
it was such a cool place to work because ESA, the European Space Agency, is made up of people from all across Europe. So most people who work at these various sites in Germany, in England, in Spain, in Italy, they aren't necessarily from Germany. So they are from other countries and have come over to work in space because that is their passion, that is their love. So all of a sudden you're surrounded by other people who are also really excited about space and about the space exploration, who've come from all over, and you get to learn from them and learn their experiences. It's like being at some sort of international summer camp, but for work.
That's so interesting. Yeah. Do you know Aaron Kidsey? He's the founder of Auto Discovery. So he's leading on kind of humanoids in the UK, but he was at the European Space Agency. It's really interesting. When I spoke to him about it, he said exactly the same thing. He goes, the most fascinating part is the people you're surrounded by, like really bright people from all different walks of life and different cultures and different ideas, and just the opportunity to work in that environment, he said, was really inspiring.
It's super inspiring, and I have absolutely sort of maintained that sort of view that like anywhere I work, I really want to be that kind of international, multicultural. You just bring more perspectives, you know. You don't realize it, but you think a certain way because of exactly where you grew up, who you spend time with, you know, your family, or things that are just in your brain and your wiring will contribute to like how you think. And then you meet someone who has grown up in a completely different way. They are going to tackle problems completely differently. And that usually only leads to good things.
Yes.
Often, some contradiction and some debate, but usually useful and always interesting.
I watched a podcast the other day about telepathy, and it was just so fascinating. Just the power of the mind and picking up on different frequencies. And
oh my God, that's a whole thing that I'm researching at the moment, is like telepathy and whether or not that's a thing.
Oh, really?
Because that would be so cool to dig into.
Yeah, there's a lady in the US, Kay, I think her name is. I'll try and dig it out for you. Who has just done a huge study on non-verbal children across the US, and from the findings of that study, she's found out that there's literally hundreds of families with non-verbal children that are able to talk to their children telepathically, and none of them talk about it because they kind of don't want to kind of get into this weird kind of my child is special kind of stuff. And she's kind of unearthed it and got some of these families talking to each other and then recognizing and then all of them are giving the same kind of examples and experiences, and they're all very, very, very similar. And so, yeah, it absolutely seems like, when someone has limited kind of sensory functions, that they're able to access different ones that maybe we don't today.
I think, 100%. I would really like to watch that or read that, because that sounds so interesting to me.
Yes.
And I think that's exactly what it would be like if there is, I guess, like a superpower or a sixth sense. I think it would be like an additional sensory thing that we have just lost tunes with. Like, it wouldn't necessarily be spiritual. That's my approach to these things. Like, I don't think it would be coming from a spiritual magic thing. I think it would be coming from something in science that we have not got to the bottom of, whether it's magnetic fields, the weirdly linking back to space weather. You think about like whales, they use magnetic fields to geolocate themselves, and when there are solar flares, like in space weather events, whales end up like beaching themselves, so they get completely messed up. Maybe humans have got that sort of reading inbuilt as well, and we just don't really need it anymore because we also have, Google Maps, and we have other things that help us. Maybe there are other things that we just are not picking up on anymore because they aren't serving us as much as they would have our ancestors. So.
Makes sense, right? I mean, we have the most developed brains of mammals, I believe.
I have no idea.
Yeah.
But maybe we do. I guess, we definitely have the most function. I would have to probably go check about octopuses, toads, and elephants and stuff. They've got different skill sets.
Yeah, but I think in terms of the breadth of kind of functionality and capability, I think the human brain is most developed. But even if it's not, it's up there amongst the best.
Yeah, it's definitely up there.
Yeah, and then we only access a limited amount of it. We only use a limited amount of our actual brain power, right, and function. So maybe it would make sense that we have this ability to...
Yeah, it's like that film Lucy with Scarlett Johansson, the one where she like unlocks 100% of her brain and then she's...
Yeah, no, absolutely. Why not? I think, what I really find fascinating about the brain actually is the fact that its ability is limited to our senses. So the things we can touch, see, smell, and actually the moment that you change our senses, our brain has the ability to process much wider ranges of data and more data points. And so that's where I think this really fascinating area of technology, isn't there, where they're kind of exploring how they can connect, neurally connect different sensors to the body to interpret different information to improve sight or hearing, and Neuralink is an example of that. But there's like loads of examples of that actually it's just about capturing the data. I think that's why they think we'll eventually see like different spectrum of light and everything. We have all of the brain power to do that, but we're just limited by our current sensory, like what our hands or what our eyes or nose is able to process, which is really interesting.
It's like it's like having the input data available to run with.
Yeah, because apparently your brain doesn't know that your nose is your nose, if that makes sense. It's just receiving the data. from that.
Yeah.
Which is fascinating. Give yourself a massive nose.
Yeah. Yeah.
Big bloodhound nose, right? We'd be able to smell like 300 yards. So you've arrived at the European Space Agency.
Yeah.
Launched from your master's.
Yes.
So did your master's prepare you well for your European Space Agency experience?
Yes, it did. So towards the end of my degree, I started to specialize in space weather.
Right.
Space weather being like the field of space science that looks at the space just around Earth, so also known as like Earth's near space region.
Okay.
And the conditions within that space that are caused by solar activity. Okay. So that could be things like solar flares or coronal mass ejections. Right. And what my project tried to do was develop a tool for predicting how likely events of certain scales were, and then using that to suggest to power networks and service providers how much of a risk they were in from space weather events.
Right.
So there's probably some stuff to unpack there in terms of like what firstly space weather events look like, the damage they can do, and like why people should be concerned.
So let's start with the first part of that. Are all space weather events solar?
Yes.
I'm guessing they are.
Yeah. So the origin is the sun. The sun is sort of the origin of all space weather. And solar activity basically comes from, maybe I'll get that wrong, but it's basically all coming from the surface of the sun and things that are coming out of the sun,
right,
and how they interact with Earth and Earth's magnetic magnetosphere, magnetic field.
As we leave our atmosphere, our 25 degrees in London, having a great time, and we go outside of our atmosphere, like the impact of the sun becomes very, very different.
Yes.
Right. So we don't, because obviously we're in a vacuum, right? As soon as we're more or less.
Yeah, it starts to, as you sort of, heading outwards, you head into a vacuum. So it will start to thin. But also up until, even the International Space Station where it orbits, most of where satellites orbit are still kind of on that cusp. So they are still protected by Earth's magnetic field, which acts as a shield against solar activity. The sun is always outputting particles. It is constantly spewing out protons, electrons, high-speed particles, and that's sort of known as the solar wind. And that's a continuous, constant flow of energy out of the sun. That is not really a concern for most people. It becomes a concern for astronauts in space because they have less of a shield, and so that's a lot of particles to be hitting you, and you can deal with like the radiation that's coming from that. But on the whole, someone on Earth, you're protected by the Earth's magnetic field. That's not really a cause for concern. Like, you are pretty shielded. It's not going to affect your everyday life. What is going to affect your everyday life is when there are particular events. So a solar flare, which is like a term that I think you hear quite often in sci-fi or like sort of danger films, and that's like a flash of light coming from the sun. Now that event in itself doesn't really impact humans so much. But what that's often associated with is something called a coronal mass ejection. And that is a big blob, effectively, of plasma that gets launched out of the sun.
Right.
And often, or not often, and sometimes can head directly towards Earth. Okay. And that is potential cause for concern because that can, instead of just bouncing straight off our magnetic field, can interact with it, and some of it can slip through. Okay. And there are a number of things that this can do here on Earth. One of the main ones.
You're about to scare the shit out of everyone, by the way.
Yeah, I was say it could do a lot. No, specifically what I was studying was something called geomagnetically induced currents. And so these are currents that are induced in the air, well, actually in the ground. So maybe I'll start with. Through the effects of space weather and the interactions with this incoming plasma and the magnetic field, you get these extra currents induced in the air and in the ground. And this has been happening for eons, and it wasn't a problem. But what happens now when these kind of events happen is that we are very technologically reliant. So we have lots of power grids and networks set up everywhere. And what those power grids do is create a really nice short circuit for the ground, because the ground is not very good at conducting electricity.
Right.
Power grids are really good at conducting electricity because it's kind of what they do. So these extra currents that have been induced in the ground by by coronal mass ejections slip into the power grids and cause them to either break, melt down, or just sometimes trigger them to switch off. It happened in the 80s, and it shut down a power grid in Canada for 9 hours, and it cost billions.
Wow.
Because no one really knew like what had caused it, and they didn't know it was coming. And you can kind of imagine the knock-on effects. So it's like, it's not just the power being the issue and the cost, but then there's a knock-on effect, everything that relied on that power. Now most payments, like banking, it's a lot of things run using electricity and online.
Very, very different from the mid to late 80s to where we are now, from terms of technological infrastructure.
Medical supplies. You've got, hospitals, you've got food supply networks, transport links, communications, all these things that totally rely on electricity. And that event was just a 9-hour event. If you had a really, really huge storm, you could see something knocked out indefinitely. It's a very short amount of time before you've got some really serious issues, like sort of society infrastructure.
Okay.
So particularly big storms could cause something really bad to happen. And historically, people often refer to a Carrington scale event.
Okay.
And the Carrington event was in 1859. There was a storm called the Carrington storm, and it was a space weather event in which aurora was seen as like far down on the world as Honolulu and as high as, I think it was Chile. So like basically you were seeing aurora in countries across the globe that you would definitely never see auroral effects before. And I think the most exciting story from it is that there were sort of telegraph operators who were functioning during this time.
Right.
And they were like, oh, something weird's going down. We should probably turn off our comms, like to save the lines from frying, because they knew something was happening. So one of the guy goes like, okay, I've turned mine off. The other guy's like, yeah, I've turned mine off too. I can still hear you. I can still hear you. And because of the additional currents that were being generated, even though they both turned off their power, they were still able to use the telegraph poles to
So they weren't able to actually control or switch off the power.
No. So they could turn it off, as in not to overload it by, adding in their own current to the circuits. But that's what was happening. And that was back then when there just really wasn't technological infrastructure. Like that really was like the main concerns that they had.
Jesus.
They just thought it was like a fun quirk. Whereas now, if we were seeing something of a similar scale, you can imagine what the knock-on effects could be.
Yes. How much advance warning are you able to get on one of these particular weather events?
At the moment, not nearly enough. At the moment, we've got hours, which is enough to make really quick changes, quickly maybe turn off some major power grid things, but it's not enough to, say, swap to a totally different system or to make any like major changes, for example, in a hospital. So you've got, at the moment, we've got satellites who are based at this point called Lagrange 1, which is effectively a spot between Earth and the sun directly in the middle. And it can only really see the front face of the sun and keep monitoring that. That only gives you the amount of time that plasma blob will take to get to Earth.
Right.
And so you're limited by that, and that's really where...
So we can't predict when it's going to happen. We can actually just see it when it happens.
When it happens, and then quickly run in.
A message to Earth.
Exactly. So at the moment, where we're at is sort of forecasting within hours, like what the event on Earth will be, and now what we call like a nowcast is sort of, okay, this is where we're at. We need to know what this is going to look like shortly. Yes. So it's we currently don't have enough forewarning, but this is something that they are looking to change. There is a future mission called Vigil that is going to launch a satellite to a point called Lagrange 5.
Right.
Similar sort of gravitational spot, but it's kind of, I would say, around I would say around the corner, but the sun does not have a corner, but sort of around the side of the sun. And what that would do is give you a front-facing view of that side of the sun, and therefore what is about to rotate round towards Earth. And therefore you can look at that, measure data, and predict what is going to launch out of the surface of the sun.
So you just
in a few days' time. So you go from having hours to about 3 days notice, and that's much more useful for having a backup infrastructure.
And I guess we're completely vulnerable to it, right? So we are just literally preparing for the worst, as opposed to there's nothing we can actually do to mitigate it happening.
Yeah, it is a case of, by mitigations, it's sort of protecting your network and it's protecting your infrastructure from the situation happening. We can't stop it happening. Like if something's on, if the coronal mass ejection is on its way, it will happen. There are different, I suppose, variables at play. For example, like you might have a huge coronal mass ejection, but the way it interacts with our magnetic field might mean that it might have more or less impact down on Earth. So you might just get a really sort of lucky moment where the way it sort of hits our magnetic field means that most of it bounces off. Yeah. It could happen. But what also could happen is maybe there's just a beautiful connection point, and the magnetic field, instead of bouncing everything off, drags everything in, which obviously is not good. And then you're going to have like a really big event down on Earth that needs dealing with.
So when you measured this Carrington event, if we were just to replicate that today, have you got any idea of the scale of the impact it might have?
Oh my goodness, there have been so many predictions, and on top of my head can't predict. Fine. But it's in the billions of dollars of damage. It's huge. You're talking a huge sort of global potential catastrophic damage.
Yeah, it's almost immeasurable, isn't it? I guess, because if it first of all, we don't have any really way. It sounds like the actual impact it could have seems to, from what you're saying, have a huge number of variables. So based on the version of it that we get, it could have different impacts. Yeah. And the second part is that we've got no real idea of its impact on a technology driven world, because there's not been anything really,
nothing like completely similar. We only have like the Quebec incident with only 9 hours to try and scale from, to try and make predictions. And it's not just the event itself that is the concern, but the domino effect through society, through the various forms. If we lose power, what does that mean for food supplies and for food storage and for purchasing food, and for medical? How do you keep people safe and alive? And crime, how do you keep on top of a society that is fully dependent on technology when that might not be possible to use? So it's a huge thing that you can't stop from happening. You just have to learn how to deal with, and that is something now that National Grid, companies across the UK and around the world are realizing and making steps towards. So part of what my master's was trying to do was making a prediction and then showing that prediction of how often these events were likely to occur is worth mitigating for. For example, like a lot of companies will be like, oh, risk versus reward. How much of a risk? Oh, does this event happen only every 1 in 1,000 years? Does it happen once in 100 years? And what's the damage that could happen for that 1 in 1,000 years? And most companies have come out and said, like, okay, no, the damage versus like the risk of something happening, it is worth mitigating for, and they are taking steps to protect their infrastructure from these events. So whether that means getting notice and quickly shutting down power grids, you can tell people like, oh, we've shut it down, sorry, you're going to be out for an hour, but in the long run it's for the best.
Yes,
that's like the kind of steps that they're putting in place.
We're just about to make huge investments in like data centers. I mean, look at Stargate. It's going to be the biggest data center ever built across the US. I think they're putting 500 billion into infrastructure for AI, which just, I assume, is going to be incredibly attractive for some sort of weather event.
Like I feel like something like that is absolutely got to be built with solar events and protection in mind.
Absolutely.
I would say not just space weather. You've also got to think about space debris, which is a growing issue in terms of just the commercial space. How can I say space?
Yes.
There are lots of things to consider. If you're putting all that data in space, is that what they're trying to do? Are they actually storing the data in space?
No. It's so Stargate is a data center that they are building in the middle of the US, physical buildings, which is racks and racks and racks of servers, and it's 500 billion of investment just to power OpenAI and all of the other AI infrastructure that the US wants to have, because it's the LLM model's capability is based on the compute, as I'm sure you're aware. And so, it's all about basically. But I'd imagine we're about to have the biggest landmass, which is just one massive, giant electrical infrastructure, which is just like a magnet for some sort of.
Yeah, no, I hadn't even thought about data centers and the effect on them. I wonder if there have been any papers that have looked into the, potential damage that has happened to data centers on Earth. There have been cases even in like South Africa, I remember, had an instance where a power grid transformer just fully caught fire in it. So I imagine a data center that's just rows and rows and rows of cables, conducting cables that would love extra current.
Suck it all up.
Yeah, I can't even really imagine the potential damage, but
So tell me about European Space Agency's interest in space weather. Is their role to monitor it on behalf of Europe? Does that make sense?
Yeah. So what European Space Agency does is they run this thing called the ESA Space Weather Service Network. And so what that is access for people, businesses, organizations to products that predict various different aspects of space weather. And that can be for communications companies who, might want to look at specific danger for their satellites. Also, the tourism, auroral tourism is like a huge thing. So it will make predictions about whether you are going to see aurora that day. So there's that area. There's also radiation, and for pilots can check it to check what kind of dosage they're getting on their flight path.
Right.
Not so much a concern for just a passenger in a plane. You're not really exposed that much. But for people who are flying the same flight routes really often, it's something worth considering, is like whether you're being exposed over and over again to certain...
That must be a huge risk for astronauts if they're outside of the atmosphere.
Yeah, it's a huge risk for astronauts. So even though on the International Space Station, for example, they are still just within the Earth's magnetosphere, so they have got some layer of protection, it's much, much less than you would have on Earth. So the radiation they are exposed to is way higher. And then NASA puts into place limits, like a threshold on how much radiation an astronaut can receive throughout their lifetime as an astronaut. So sort of at one point they will be like, okay, look, honestly, this is too much than we are happy to risk your life on. That's you grounded now. And I don't know, but I suspect that's probably got a lot to say for a lot of the astronauts going from NASA to commercial, because maybe they don't have so many rules to keep them out of space, because I think astronauts do like being in space.
Do they? Well, you've sat down with quite a few, haven't you?
I have sat down with quite a few. They're very interesting people. It's funny, having spoken to them, I don't think being an astronaut is a job for me.
Really?
It's not for me. I don't think I'd quite appreciated all the various aspects of their job. I think when you're a kid, you think like, oh yeah, I just want to go to space and float around and just look cool and wave and cool people from space. Their job seems hard work. Really? You do all that training to go to space. You get there, you are a mechanic, you are the person, a plumber, you are a doctor, you're your own dentist, you are a guinea pig for experiments. I've been told they don't always love that term, but they are subject to experiments, much like a guinea pig. They are everything. And they are up there for 6 months at a time with, the same people. 6 months at a time, is like sort of your average duration, some longer, some less. Their lives, they're every day mapped out, a lot of work, and a lot of like high risk work. But I'm sure it's very rewarding, but it sounds really tiring.
Really exhausting.
Really
exhausting. And incredibly isolating.
Yeah.
What I found really interesting from Aaron was he was saying that in space, they don't use the most modern technology.
No.
Actually, they use some of the oldest technology because they're interested in stuff being more robust and proven not to break than they are to have stuff that's really advanced. So when they build he was building rovers to go on Mars.
Yeah.
They were using technology which was 10 years old, but it had 10 years to prove that it won't break.
Yeah.
And so that's interesting that you talk about, it's like mechanics and plumbing.
Yeah.
It literally is very practical. It's not the latest kind of, robotics technology that we're using for eye surgery or stuff like that. Yeah. It's actually much more rudimentary.
Yeah, most things. Actually, most things across all space missions, so not just human exploration, probes that are going off to different areas of the solar system, they sort of put a technology lock when they start the design process for building these things. They put a technology lock and okay, we're going to stop our technology at 1997.
Right.
Actually, I'm forgetting that we're in 2025 now. They probably started much later, 2010.
Yep.
And they're that's where we're finishing our updates. We're not going to try and incorporate anything new because you don't know how it's going to interact with the older tech. Some things are going to, transfer really easily. Some things are going to just make things life harder. So they stop there and they say okay, new updates, that's for future mission. That's something else. So they do that so as to not cause more stress down the line, basically trying to fix things bit by bit. Yeah. And like you said, on the space station, while they do have some really high-tech areas doing high-tech science, often that is as part of a test. The stuff that they are using and relying on is often solid, rudimentary, but often still has to be really interestingly engineered because a lot of the things you might take for granted, like drinking water, breathing, in space is not so simple. So they have to think about all these different things. There are fans that move the air around the cabins because the air does not move itself. So it's sort of, I don't know, you think of it as this high-tech thing, but it's almost really basic tech to keep everyone going so that they can test high-tech on board.
It's like an alien environment to us.
Yeah. It's alien, and it is. Space is a hostile environment to humans. Humans are not designed for space at all. So everything has to be tailored to make their space in space as Earth-like as possible, which is quite funny. It's you go away from Earth just to make space as close to Earth as possible to try and make it comfortable and livable.
It has none of the resources we want.
No.
And
no, literally none.
None. Including gravity.
Yeah, including gravity. It's it's not an easy place to live.
What are the biggest risks, do you think? Exposure to radiation being one?
Exposure to radiation, micrometeoroid impacts and space debris. That's increasingly space debris coming from the rise in commercial satellites is a huge risk now. A bit, I suppose, fire on board, fire on Earth, bad. Fire in space, really bad. There's also just...
Why is it really bad?
So on Earth, fire kind of behaves as we expect. You sort of got the flame flickering like that. In space, the fire sort of creates this sort of spherical blob.
Okay.
And it will just hover there. But if you nudge it or you try and put it out, it will sort of float off. And if you don't manage to put it out, if you've got a fire extinguisher and you try and extinguish a blob of fire in space, it might sort of expand and spread, and suddenly you've got two balls of fire that are also catching on more fires.
So is the objective for it to burn whatever is burning, burn itself out?
Yes, that would be the ideal scenario. If you had a small fire, I'm trying to imagine a scenario where you've accidentally set your dinner on fire and it's just on fire there. The ideal scenario would be that it doesn't touch anything and cause more fire, and you don't accidentally spread that fire. Astronauts are absolutely trained to deal with fires, and they have a lot of training that goes into this. But putting it out is not as straightforward as just getting fire extinguisher and extinguish it.
It's a video footage of a fire in space.
So there's video footage, but I think mostly from experiments. Like they've never, on the ISS, they've never, touch wood, had a fire on board.
Yeah, but they have done tests with it.
They have done tests with it. So they have to. They have exactly.
Imagine being the first guy to try that.
I know. Well, also I think is really crazy. On the Mir, one of the predecessors to the ISS, there was a fire, and those guys still did fire experiments after their huge, life-threatening fire, and that one was particularly bad because effectively their oxygen generator, as far as I remember, caught fire. So that's just sort of shooting oxygen almost like a flamethrower that was on fire, and the fire blocked their exit from the space station. So they had to tackle the fire. They could not escape. That was their only option. And they used 4 fire extinguishers.
Wow.
I think I would have to go back and check, but I don't think the fire extinguishers put it out. I think it did extinguish itself, luckily. We talked about. And they're just lucky.
You got to kind of manage it so it doesn't go anywhere.
Yeah.
I'm imagining these kind of asbestos cooking gloves.
Yeah.
People batting fire, keeping it away from anything.
Honestly, I think it was probably something like that. Like the Mir was the predecessor, and it was a Russian space station.
Right.
And the Russians are very good at building space stations. That's like sort of what they did and what they brought to the ISS. But a lot of the stuff they do is just like very like, kind of classic engineering, like duct tape things together. Yes. Like that works. So I could totally imagine oven gloves keeping the fire over there, just a bit crazy, like they're very much like learn on the job as their approach to space.
But like you say, like it's interesting. The risks are so different. And I get, and going back to that technology thing is that's why having technology has proven itself over a 10-year period it's all about risk mitigation.
Yeah.
Because these things are so fucking expensive.
Yeah. Yeah. The ISS, if you think, is $150 billion. That's the most expensive scientific laboratory built.
Yes.
I think ever, but maybe just in space. But that's insane, and if something does happen on board, you could potentially lose the whole crew, you can lose people, but you could also lose all of the experiments on board and all of the sort of resources that have gone into building something of that scale. So,
it's crazy. Well, there's a good chance that the British government will, outperform that with HS2, the railway.
It's on its way. It's on its way up there.
The railway line that now stops 25 miles short of London.
Take a little bus. Take a bus to the start of the train.
Yeah, Birmingham to Wickham. It's a really common.
You should just add a stop to the ISS, then we can link up.
It's fine. It's worth it. It's fine. You'll get to Wickham really quickly, and then you can get a bus. What? Fucking talk some sense into that. I mean, it's phenomenal, isn't it?
Yeah,
phenomenal.
That is mad.
I mean, the government, I just don't get it. I mean, the Sloane Street, just down the corner here, they spent 2 years building 2 pavements and a row of trees, 70 million quid. And you're like, how did you shut down? It's a long street, probably 300 meters long. But what? Like, China is building power plants, nuclear plants, railways, airports, multiple of them annually. Do you know what I mean? A couple of pavements,
Yeah, that is madness.
It is just crazy. And so, I just think they just need a massive kick up. Like a government has a huge responsibility to free up fund, wasting stuff on fucking pavements and putting it into the NHS or even, more importantly, space innovation, R&D.
Space agencies.
Yeah. So tell me about the space debris bit. So you mentioned that. So that's a real risk. So we've got this. You mentioned the commercial satellites. They are filling our skies up.
So if we think when first things were going to space, there were satellites were in the hundreds. Mm-hmm. We're now tens of thousands, 30,000. We're heading towards millions of satellites. I think there probably already are when taking into consideration cube satellites and much smaller craft. Each one of those satellites has to be mapped and tracked because if one of them slips off course or if something gets damaged and explodes, that becomes a piece of like potential space debris.
Yep.
And one impact could then lead to multiple impacts because, you know, so if one piece breaks apart, you've got now two potential impactors that could go on to have a knock-on effect. And there's this thing called the Kessler syndrome, which is effectively the point at which the low Earth orbit space is so crowded that one impact will cause a knock-on domino effect of infinite more impacts. And that's a real thing that, scientists are planning to avoid, basically. Like, you know, there is a real consensus from space agencies across the world, in particular the UK Space Agency has made it a really big pillar of their focus, is to avoid this and to avoid this using firstly thinking mission planning. So thinking from the beginning, like when a mission finishes, how will we bring the spacecraft down and remove it from the space so it's not just a dead satellite and potential hazard. They're also doing this through clean space missions. So there's the active debris removal, going to space, trying to sort of garbage gather and bring it down back to Earth so it can burn up. So you effectively want to avoid a scenario where you can't see the sky through all the different satellites that are going to be up there.
Yeah, because it's becoming a much more accessible. Obviously, Elon's made his satellites, is it 60 times closer to Earth than to traditional satellites, which means that's what gives them this superior Wi-Fi capability. But with that comes this inherent risk that we're flooding our skies. Is there is that an international role, or because I guess that it's not like maritime, is it? Like the UK doesn't own the space above it.
Yeah, the US tried, I think. So I think a long time ago, I'd have to check which country it was. Somewhere along the equator, one of the countries tried to own the space above them, basically, because a geostationary orbit is really popular for satellites. They failed, and space is sort of free for all in terms of anyone can put a satellite basically anywhere. I do wonder if the US had tried to do that, they probably would have been more successful. They kind of have that power over things.
Yes.
But at the moment, so it's not. It's more, I mean, I say global space agencies are thinking about this more as like an act of goodwill, in effect. It's not, I'd have to check actually if the UN have made it like a legal requirement, but there's definitely a movement to think about this more seriously moving forward to protect the space industry in general.
At the end of the day, it's going to become it will become their social responsibility, won't it?
Yeah.
As space becomes more important, they know at some point in time they're going to have to pick up the problems that they've created.
Yeah, because it's danger to satellites that you've put up, because you could just end up accidentally destroying something you've spent ages building. It's dangerous to the people who are living up in space. And also if you want to go further afield, and even if you don't want to live in low Earth orbit, if you want to go to the moon, you still got to navigate through that. It's like you're building your own sort of asteroid field, and you can kind of picture you have to really map a trajectory that's not going to hit anything.
Have you seen any plans on how they're going to tackle that?
I've seen a few plans, but I actually don't know how serious they were. It was when the ESA did a call back in 2017, I think it was, for ideas on how you combat space debris. And I knew that one of them was sort of like a big space vacuum, effectively. So it was just going to suction. And one of them is a really big net. And I do think that the net idea is going ahead, and sort of like a sort of, you can almost picture one of those guns that sort of goes shoo, and then drags everything back in a big fishing net
style. That really is something out of Star Wars.
Yeah, definitely. It really feels like it. And that's, I guess, probably where people are getting the inspiration from. I think Astroscale, the company Astroscale based at Harwell, are really getting into this area to look into clean space. There's
so much innovation in this space, isn't there? The opportunity is massive.
Yeah, the opportunity is massive. And then also it's almost like vital work in order to have any progress in any other area of space exploration, because without that, suddenly the rest of space is off limits. Astronomy would be off limits. You won't be able to see the exoplanets. We can't go any further. We won't be able to see any further.
We just have a responsibility to get that right. We're fucking our own planet up. We can't start to fuck other planets up.
Space.
Yeah. Jesus, man. But I think maybe we're able to learn from our mistakes on that a little bit retrospectively. So it's good to hear that they're on it. But I guess you'd like to think they come up with something slightly more scientific. But maybe that. Have you seen that ocean cleanup business, which go out with the nets and just get?
Oh no!
There's ocean cleanup, which is just getting plastic out of rivers, and they've just got huge nets, effectively. Yeah,
that's what we need. Just big nets in space, big nets in the sea, big nets on the street.
What's the possibilities, do you think, of us catching an alien in one of those nets? Where do you stand on it? We had to venture into this, didn't we?
Yeah.
The UAP space.
I think catching one in those nets, low. I would say I would be happy to say 0% of catching an alien in one of those space debris nets.
Right.
Where I stand on the potential alien debate, I think it would be crazy if there weren't not alien life out there in the universe.
Yep.
I think it is highly unlikely.
Okay.
I also think that if life does exist, there will be intelligent life out there. What I worry is that it's not only like geographic distance that might separate us, it could also be temporal, like time. Humans have been around. I cannot remember how long humans have been around. Suddenly it's like hundreds of thousands of years. Yep. Our solar system has only been around for like 5 billion years or a bit more. The universe has been around 13.8 billion years. There could be a whole other similar solar system just like ours with some form of life just like ours, but it might have existed 10 billion years ago and killed itself off.
Might have survived 1 billion years or so.
Yeah, it might have been the craziest. It might have far exceeded us and then just sort of burnt out. And that's my concern, is that we've got to overcome both the distance and the time.
What's really interesting, I think, is the fact that I think in 50 years, the US haven't had any congressional hearings on this stuff. And then in the last, I think it's 3 years, they've had 3 congressional hearings on UAPs.
Yeah.
And you've got more and more credible people coming out saying that they're witnessing this stuff.
Yeah. It is really interesting. I would love to sit down with someone, who was that? There was that person who apparently used to work for the government and came, I can't remember what his name was, but he fully came out and said, like, look, yeah, there are totally aliens. And we've just been keeping a secret because the world aren't ready.
Yes.
I want to sit down with one of these people, and so I can be like, right, are you telling the truth?
Yeah.
Do you really believe it? Should
There's
we believe them?
There's a couple of them that have come out, though, which are like super high ranking.
Yeah.
Like the equivalent of kind of, the SBS or SAS kind of in the US, right in the very top part of, but intelligence focused.
Yeah.
Really top part of intelligence. Absolutely kind of marked, beautiful career, and have come out and said, look, the world needs to know about this.
Yeah.
And then they're limited what they can say by the security clearance. But it just seems to me like there just seems to be too many people who have and they've not been cancelled by people coming out and dismissing their claims with some sort of like, it'd be very easy to get rid of them, wouldn't it? Because if they had a problematic career, this guy left because of X, Y, or Z, or he had problems in his career. Actually, they all seem super smart. You sat there with some like doctors and top pilots who are just saying, look, we're seeing this stuff.
Yeah. But then part of me also wonders if they're not saying it's not aliens because they're not worried about that, it could potentially be something worse, or, like something they really don't want to talk about, that they are happy for people to be like, maybe it's aliens.
Yes.
So a part of me is like, I am absolutely what I would call like a hopeful skeptic. I would love for something kind of interesting like the UAPs to be legit. Like I always say, like ghosts, aliens, psychic skills. I am so open to it because I would love to see something kind of, you know, a bit exciting and
Factual.
a little bit something out there, you know, that doesn't feel super, you know, understood. But I really have to see the evidence. My brain can't. That's why I say hopeful skeptic. I'm so open for someone to come and tell me and prove to me what they've said.
But you're not computing without the without the facts.
I can't. Until they actually show me the evidence, all I see is sort of excuses to avoid handing the evidence over. And it's like, okay, they are saying are using themselves as evidence, but I feel like a person's story is often, you know, a bit biased, even if they don't realize that they're being biased. Yeah. So maybe they did believe that they saw aliens or were working with aliens, but maybe they're just believing what they were told by other people. Do
you think it's a rational excuse to withhold that information from the general public because they're not able to deal with it? People say it would challenge religion, and
I think it would challenge religion. I think it would be. So it's really funny. I worked on a television show called First Contact, an alien encounter.
Right.
And it imagined what First Contact, it was for BBC. It was for the BBC. I can't remember which channel. It was for the BBC, and it was supposed to imagine what alien contact, intelligent alien contact might look like in like a hypo, I guess, real scenario. So like, not alien abductions, alien warfare. What would happen if we actually did receive some form of evidence of other intelligent life out there? And one of the whole lines of questioning and like sort of research that I did was into what it would do to religions and the knock-on effect, and also what that would mean to society. Like a lot of people, there would be a lot of fear, I think. But what was really interesting is that a lot of people believe that what we could bump into in space, especially the way we're going with our future and our technology, is like artificial intelligence. We could bump into artificial intelligence in space. And what does that mean for humanity?
Yes.
It's like, do we consider that to be life? I mean, it's not life in the way that we know it, but it's evidence of life having at least built it. And what if that artificial intelligence comes with its own system, cultural system that it's learned from its society? What if it doesn't come with life? I've gone on. There are too many nodes where my brain's just gone with different
but it's
ideas.
Amazing. You're
but
absolutely
it's such an interesting area, because historically, how humans have treated other people, like when they have gone exploring, has not been great. Like when, you know, the earliest explorers found new communities, cultures, I'd say, you know, historically, a lot of bad things have taken place when that's happened.
Yeah.
So, you know, what lessons has humanity learned going forwards? If we meet a totally new version of intelligent life, you'd hope that we'd behave differently than our ancestors have behaved in the past.
I think we would, but you're right. The first thing would be survival instinct before anything else. Safety and survival would be the first and foremost position, wouldn't it?
Yeah. But also, like, we somehow need to work together as a consensus as a world. Like, you know, if we meet someone from another planet, we are now one unit. To them, they do not care about all our countries and our politics and our internal problems. We are just one species that they would come into contact with. So we suddenly very quickly have to learn how to work as a planet.
I do wonder whether, I have given this some thought before, whether an event like that is what actually unifies us, weirdly.
Yeah, I think probably you're right.
Yeah, is it that one huge event that all of a sudden just everyone realizes, whoa, we've got far bigger problems than working out who should have a few more silicon chips, or or who should own the Suez Canal rights to shipping containers. You know, let's just think about this bigger issue here. Get together, get in a room, and work out how to deal with it. Yeah. And we assume it's a problem, actually. Yeah, but if there was something that much more advanced and it saw us as a problem, I guess it would have dealt with us.
Yeah.
I guess if it's that much more advanced, we'd look pretty primitive compared to it, really.
Yeah. Yeah, well, that's one of the things that they often say is that they might look to us like we look to ants. Like we might just be a bit of nothing. And actually that's the sort of direction we took the show in, is that we had it so there was an artifact that you could tell was definitely intelligently designed, had been built. It was not obvious whether or not it was still functioning, and the object doesn't stop, it just travels straight past. And it's like, well, what effect would that have on humanity? You know that there was something. We don't know if it was on board. You also don't know if it cared. Did it spot us? Did it miss us? Did it care?
It was all
and it's like all of those questions. Is that so? That's what we just decided to go with the storyline of, and try to like sort of fathom what the knock-on effects would be in that very specific scenario. It also saved us from having to like imagine what an alien would look like.
So cool. So you leave the European Space Agency and you foray into TV and production where you're living today, which is just fascinating.
Yeah, no, it's the dream job. I love it. And it feels like no two projects are the same. Even though I've spent a lot of time in space TV, no two projects have been the same. They've all been very different. Yeah, absolutely.
And then the guy that inspired you into the industry,
yes,
Brian Cox.
Yeah,
you've actually now had the pleasure of working with him, I believe.
Yes, yeah, I have. Year 9, wondered of the solar system, watching the show, thinking like, oh my gosh, I could actually do this space thing. Seems really cool and relatable. I got to go a full circle moment and go and be an assistant producer on the later series of Solar System, which meant researching all the stories, like helping with the VFX and being on location in some of those like awesome locations, and helping make sure we get the best content for the show. So
cool. So you get to marry up your passion of space exploration and astrophysics with actually your creative skills. You've ended up bringing them both together.
Yeah. So like when I left school, then I just was like, oh, I'm going to start in space and see where that inspiration takes me. It totally took me exactly where I didn't realize, but I wanted to go. I've managed to somehow totally manifest.
Yeah. Amazing.
I think I was very open to where it could take me, and I've loved where I've ended up. So
yeah. Where does that bring us today? We are innovating and looking at a future of asteroid mining. And actually, no, I'm going to go back. So where are we today? So we're exploring. We're thinking about getting to Mars. We've now got reusable rockets. Yeah. We've got commercial investors in the space race. Where do you see it going from where you're sat?
I think right now we're at a really interesting time in the space industry. I think as the space industry stood, NASA was the boss. They held all the cards. So like what they would do with respect to these commercial companies is that they would design a mission, put out a tender and say like, oh, actually, we need a rocket to take us up, or we need someone to help design this. Right. And these companies would come forward and go for it. We're now at the point where these companies can do stuff by themselves. They are taking over. They are building their own versions of the space stations. We are seeing the replacements for the ISS that are going to come from these commercial companies. And what that's sort of done is taken away a lot of the power from NASA. We've seen since January, like repeated cuts to the NASA budget. And now is not a great time in the sort of, I suppose, NASA space agency space. But what we are about to see is a new space race. We are absolutely on the edge of a new space race that will be commercial companies competing to do the next thing.
Yes.
Which is exciting. What I think is a shame is that what NASA and what ESA and what Roscosmos and JAXA and the Canadian Space Agency all managed to do was work cooperatively internationally on the International Space Station, for example, and on other missions too. We will not see that so much with this commercial wave. This will be a competition-driven wave of innovation, which brings, that's sort of what got people to the moon in the first place. There's competition, it was Russia versus the US. So there will be things that come out of it, but sort of all the things that we've learned about working together cooperatively as the world, basically, I think some of that is going to be missing.
Do you know what? There is 100% going to be a land grab. There's no doubt about that. But I think there will be a scientific requirement of any of those commercial businesses to share their findings. And it's funny actually talking about that unified, that globally unifying experience. It was amazing to see that, you're seeing on the news this kind of geopolitical war between China and the US and Russia, and everyone's at each other's throats, it seems, the whole time. And then the US managed to mine, I don't know, a small amount, I don't know, maybe 50 grams of a meteorite 2 years ago. And what was amazing, that it kind of jetted down landed back to Earth.
Ah, yes.
It gets taken to a laboratory somewhere, like nothing can contaminate this. And then I was amazed to see that it was then divided up and shared with all of the international space communities for research.
Yeah.
And I was just like, wow, that sets the precedent, man. That sets the precedent. That's how we should be operating. How can we not kind of manage to kind of use that as the benchmark for so many other of the unilateral opportunities and initiatives that we've got to just work much more collaboratively together? We can do it on one thing and do it on 10 things, right?
Yeah. No, 100%.
But it was good to see that. And so I reckon that there will be a requirement for these, in order for them to have these licenses that they've got and funding from NASA. I guess that they will have a requirement to share all their data and findings back.
Yeah, well, I really hope so. But like with the most recent cuts to NASA,
yes,
the areas most hit were the science. The science was cut. That's where most of people have lost their jobs and have taken redundancy. Because I think it's not obvious always to taxpayers, I guess, what the science is delivering.
Yes.
I guess when they see the rockets and they see it, and they're like, that's obviously where the money is going. But when it's the knock-on effect of what that science is doing, I think people don't see the tangible results and then don't necessarily connect with it.
Yeah.
But no, I really hope that they maintain the science going forward with these commercial missions that are going to be a bit different.
So when I done an asteroid mining, my first asteroid mining kind of podcast, and I really started to learn about it, the one thing that I realized was that despite all of the kind of glamour around wanting to be a multi-planetary species and space tourism, and all of the different kind of main use cases, I all of a sudden realized just how much of a gold rush there is for the resources that are available to be mined and to be made accessible.
Yeah.
And actually, for me, that made a huge amount of sense as to why people would also want to be involved in the commercialization of the space.
Yeah, no, definitely.
Space
I think
race.
I don't know too much about the material makeup of some of the asteroids, but I know that there's one asteroid that gets thrown out, I think 16 site there, that's supposed to have a ridiculous amount of all sorts of materials. I think it's like a ridiculous amount of gold and potentially more on board, I guess, built in.
Yes.
And that's definitely one of like the targets that people always talk about when it comes to mining. What this last mission was, the sample return. So that wasn't so much mining, but it was more of a sample return, because all they did in that situation was they landed and effectively had these sort of like trigger release scoop, because the asteroid they landed on was totally like a gravel ball, if you think of like lots of gravel all held together by gravity. So it kind of sank into it, and it was like falling into a ball pit. So it sort of scooped up, and it actually got, because it was so much more gravelly than they were expecting, the sample holds are totally full, and that they were worried that was going to cause damage because it didn't seal totally shut. It was just so, I mean, from their point of view, they got way more sample than they were hoping to get. Yeah. But I think, they, in that situation, the target was soft. It wasn't mining. Yes. Whereas gold or more, they're going to have to find a way to hunker down, drill in, gather samples, launch, all whilst, I suppose, not impacting the object that they've landed on, because they could easily just mess up the trajectory that asteroid is on, sending it further away, making their job just more difficult to get back from. So,
I know. And these things are traveling, like, they're huge. They're like maybe a kilometer long or even more. And they're traveling at, I think, 60, 70,000 kilometers an hour. It's just so weird. Although that's absolutely doesn't feel like that when you're stood on it, because it's in a complete vacuum, which makes it even fucking weirder.
Yeah.
It's just so alien to understand that. You're traveling at that speed with zero resistance.
Yeah. Well, to bring it back just to the International Space Station is moving at, I think it's like 17,500 miles an hour. But when you watch those videos of the astronauts on their, spacewalk, just floating around, they're just elegantly traveling around at nearly 20,000 miles an hour, just floating by. Yeah. But all the objects that are going past with them, they're also going at that speed. And that's when I think space debris makes sense. Those collisions are powerful. Just because it looks all soft and floating and like nothing's going that fast, you sort of forget that those are some pretty hefty speeds involved.
And then we get back to relativity, don't we? Because really, it's all of that is complete relative.
Yeah, exactly.
And I was going to lean into that a bit, because the one thing that seems to be happening right now is that the innovation and understanding in space, particularly with the James Webb telescope and some of these other things, is actually really challenging the stuff that you learned at school when you first came in, right? The real core physics.
Yeah.
And it seems like that's being challenged more than ever right now.
It probably is. I can't think of any examples, so please feel free to ask me on examples. But what I think what people are realizing, I'm trying to think of something on this.
Yeah. So for example, their understanding of black holes is changing, and then that's getting their understanding of gravity to be gravitational pull is changing as an example. So the theory of that is being.
I think it's really becoming clear that the model we have in terms of relativity, in terms of particles, in terms of the Big Bang, is definitely not complete. Like things, there are gaping holes that, the model will work really well for some parts, and then it doesn't work in other parts. And what that tells us is that we are missing vital pieces of information. And we're getting closer. And, when we realize, okay, well, one model works for this part, but doesn't do this bit, when you're thinking about like the really huge, like the larger scales, you've got models that work there, you've got models that work at the smaller scales. There are still huge gaps. And I think weirdly, as more like experiments and more theories come about, I feel like it might feel like we get further from the truth than closer. But really, like what science is always trying to do, science isn't necessarily finding the answer, it's just honing in, like repeatedly getting closer and closer and closer to something that is as close to reality as possible. Actually, that's something like I always try and fit in, is that I think when people think of science, they think of truth, and that's not quite what science is. Science is the process of trying to work out what is going on. And I think people, especially when you have things like the pandemic and things where they're like, oh, but the science says this. I'm like, well, actually the science doesn't like say anything.
It
science
points in that direction.
Science suggests, science is trying to determine, science hints and suggests, and and it gets closer. But science almost never says this is what it is. So that's something I always like try and keep in mind whenever I see that headline, like science says this.
And that is because there are holes.
Yeah.
Isn't it? The truth only comes when they fill all the holes.
Yeah, exactly. And, the more work we do, the more holes we realise there are.
And that's my point. So, yeah, absolutely. And I think when they look at that, you look at space, you look at quantum right now, it's just fascinating, isn't it? That, that they're starting to really understand this kind of, the thing that I keep reading a lot about is quantum entanglement, identifying the relationship between two particles, and those particles could be any distance apart. And it's kind of, I guess, as we get deeper into these areas, it's going to start to maybe not challenge the physics we know, but actually, like you say, start to fill in some of the gaps.
Yeah, I feel like the more I won't try and pretend to understand quantum. I think I could read it for hours and hours and hours and still know only like a sentence that I could probably say about it. But I think the more research that is working firstly into how quantum physics works, and then the applications of quantum physics, you've got quantum computing picking up. I think that is going to start telling us a lot more about the models that we have of our universe. What it will tell us, I could not guess.
You couldn't guess.
Well, I could hope all sorts of things.
You can be excused for not being able to explain quantum, because I think I said to you earlier today that even Brian Cox is actually struggling, and he actually says, look, it does, when he explains it, he always caveats it at the end, doesn't he, by saying, and just to let you know, this doesn't make any sense to me either.
Yeah.
Which is just like mind-bogglingly weird.
It's super weird. And one of my friends, he's just started a PhD in quantum computing, I believe. Right. And sometimes he'll just come and he'll start talking to me about it. And I think when people are so deep in that kind of research space, they sort of forget how insane it sounds. And he's there telling me about these fridges that he's built in order to like hold the quantum something in the chips in the state. And I'm like, none of this is relatable content for life. But I would love to understand. I wish I understood more about it. And I bet there are some very interesting people in that world worth speaking to.
Well, you have had the opportunity to meet a lot of super interesting people since you've moved into, obviously, the production world. So tell us a bit about your most recent kind of projects. What sort of stuff have you been working on?
Yeah, so my most recent project is due hopefully to come out in November.
Right.
And it's a documentary about the International Space Station, hence why a lot of my anecdotes were about the International Space Station. My head has very much been with astronauts recently, and I've had the opportunity to travel to the US and to Europe, basically rounding up astronauts to interview, and ground crew, old current and former astronauts and ground station staff, to talk to them about their experiences working with the ISS program. And that has been so interesting. In particular, we were really wanting to tell the whole story of the ISS. So the ISS is coming up to 25 years. Actually, that's not quite right. So it's 25 years of continuous human presence in space.
Right.
I think for a lot of people, the ISS is almost taken for granted. Like, you kind of forget that for the last 25 years, not every human has been on Earth. There has been someone in space continuously for 25 years. And I think that's a bit maddening. It's like, they're just up there. Like, humanity is just off-world. We are an off-world civilization.
Incredible.
And have been. There are many people alive today for whom people have been in space. Like, they've been on a world where not everyone has been home on. And I think it's just kind of insane. And so that's really, we wanted to tell that story. It's the ISS is going to probably be decommissioned around 2030. And we wanted to sort of celebrate the fact that we've got 25 years continuous humanity in space. What did it take to get here in terms of building, in terms of running, in terms of living in space and just keeping going, and all the science that's come from it. They're doing these insane experiments, in basically every area of science. I think a lot of people think of the ISS as being in space, so it's doing space science. A lot of it is medical science. A lot of it is about life and what we know about how the body ages and how the body changes over time. So that we tried to somehow fit as much of that as possible into this documentary, using the experiences of the astronauts themselves and meeting these incredible people.
Amazing. What an incredible group of people to spend time with. And I look forward to seeing it, first of all, which is great. And what's your big takeaway from the people because one of the most fascinating things I read is the moment that people look back, they leave our atmosphere and they look back on the planet and they just see it in green and blue, and it just sits there in amongst the rest of the world. It's the most kind of calming and unifying and valuing experience that they can have. And it makes them it really questions humanity in the way that, I guess the way that we devalue our planet in many, many ways. What did you take away from their experiences?
So I think every single one of them had something to say about that effect.
Really?
They call it the overview effect. Is that I don't know who coined the term.
Right.
But it's that moment where they said they look back at Earth for the first time. And for many of them, it takes them a while because they're so focused. A lot of them, it will be on their first mission to space.
Yep.
And they're so focused on the mission at hand that they don't even think about really what's going on outside of the spacecraft. And they said it happens at this moment they turn back and they realize what they're looking at, and they realize that they are looking at Earth, that everyone else they know, everyone they love is there, and it looks small and it looks fragile. They always say it looks so fragile, and they talk about the fact that it becomes really obvious to them how special it is. One of the things they often say is that I feel like people say like, oh, in space you can't see borders. They say, unfortunately, you can see borders. You can see natural disasters. You can see conflict from space. Wow. And you realize just how vulnerable the Earth is. And it's like, well, no, you want to protect that. And so for most of them, they said they going to space made them feel so protective of Earth and wanting to do something for it. Thomas Pesquet in particular has made it like his sort of, I guess, Earth mission is to really get that across to people.
Yeah.
And so that I thought was really, I found it really moving, because I think going into it, I kind of expecting like, oh yes, they go and they have this enlightenment and it's all very worthy, but no, I totally went, they were really serious about it. It's not a sort of holier than thou, oh, I've had this experience, I've been enlightened, I see a future of peace. They look back and they see a world that needs protecting, that needs help. And I was like, oh no, that's something I can definitely understand and get behind. And they said one of their biggest wishes is that more people would get that experience.
Yeah.
And that's what a lot of them hope with commercial exploration, is that more people that, they don't necessarily have to have all the astronaut qualifications will be able to go to space and have that moment.
World leaders comes to mind.
Oh yeah, world leaders should definitely have that moment, and just like
Yeah, if you want to be a world leader,
call.
Yeah, you want to join the G7 or the EU or any of these big, blocks that we've got. You've got to go and do the space trips. Like, sorry guys, so you know what you're actually looking after.
Yeah.
Yeah, it just makes so much sense. I can almost feel it when you're explaining it. I can just almost, like, the hairs on my arms are going up. Like I'm just thinking about how we've invested in all of this technology and all of these telescopes, right? And we can actually see, I think now 9 or 10 billion years away. And we've not managed to find another planet that's green and blue.
No.
And we're just sat there as this tiny dot in the middle of this unexplainable vastness of grey.
Yeah.
And sun and sunlight. That's it. And for some reason, they just don't understand how precious that is.
Yeah.
And it's I've had the same thought myself. Just how can we get that experience into more people in the planet?
Sorry, I was about to choke.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like an initiation to join the planet.
Yeah. If there was a way to give everyone that experience, I think a lot more people, I think people would realize what humanity is, what being a human is, and a lot of the things that divide us. I mean, I obviously can't speak for how everyone would respond in that moment, but it sounds like the main impression that it's given everyone who's gone up there is that of protecting what we have, that we have something special. And I think that is important, because I think it's really, really easy with space, because it's so huge and there are so many planets out there, to think like, oh, we're so small and we are so tiny, and we are. But then, that one in the, billions and billions and billions, that makes us special as well, and important. If we are the only life form in the whole of the universe, which I feel hopefully is unlikely. But if that is, then there's also a lot of responsibility there to not burn ourselves out, because if then we go, then there is nothing there to experience any of the rest.
How far away are we from space commercialization where a higher volume of people will be able to do this, do you think?
So from people that I've spoken to in the industry, I got the sense that we are tens of years away from a higher volume, but that will still be, I guess, quite expensive, and it will still be like millionaires, but it's getting more and more affordable. So I do think within, I would be predicting, I don't know, 50 years away from things getting
high
a
volumes.
lot more, much higher volume.
I guess with the Blue Origin stuff, we managed to send Katy Perry up, right? Did she have that experience? I believe they did, didn't they? They did. Yeah, they did have that overview as you describe it. So maybe in the next few years, there'll be the opportunity to start to send world leaders up there.
Yeah.
Just small volumes of people.
I really think with the Katy Perry sort of media frenzy that occurred afterwards, I actually think it's kind of a shame. I think it was a marketing error to frame it the way they framed it as like the first all-female crew, because then that took the attention away from what it was. And what it was showing people Earth from space. It was, if they had kept it as like more lighthearted, more fun, I think people would
non-astronaut people, everyday people in some respects. And you're right. How much better would it have been if they had taken everyday people? If they had taken the head nurse at the NHS?
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Or it's just remarkable individuals that have given something remarkable to them.
And some of the people on that mission were, were former like NASA researchers on there. And unfortunately, I don't have the names. But I also think it wasn't like unfair or unwise to send Katy Perry up there. She's an artist and she has a huge following, and she can dispel like that feeling to her audiences through her music. What I think is just an unfortunate thing is that the way it was framed drew sort of negative attention to the whole event. And then, the media sort of turned on her as though it was in a negative way, but I in a way that I don't think would have happened if they had chosen to market it differently.
I think it actually worked.
Yeah.
From a marketing perspective, it was done to put Blue Origin on the map because SpaceX is smashing it. Mm-hmm. And the controversy over it has actually given it created the awareness around the brand that they wanted.
Yeah.
Yeah, it wasn't done for any other reason, really. It was just to raise awareness with Blue Origin is on the map. We're putting people into space as well. Here we are. Watch out for us.
No, that's true. That probably was. I mean, that's probably their...
Yeah, of course,
their angle.
Yeah.
But I did feel for Katy Perry with all the, like, backlash she got. And I was like anyone would have said no. If they were just offered a trip to space...
it's not her fault.
I'd say yes. I wouldn't have as much negative press probably, because everyone would be like, who's that? Just some regular girl probably. But, she got negative just because of who she is. And I think, that's a shame. But...
Look, it's been fascinating to talk to you. Thank you for taking the time out.
No, thank you for having me. I hope you enjoyed. I really enjoyed chatting, and I feel like we covered a lot.
I've taken so much from it, but the one thing I will say is that the biggest thing is that if you follow your dreams, if you really commit to them, you are living your dream, right? You're being creative in an absolutely fascinating 1 in 100 opportunity at that moment in time. So just well done to you. Yeah.
Thank you for having me. This is it's been really fun to just chat about all of these things and just explore it. I've really, really enjoyed.
Well, you're normally one that's asking the questions.
Yeah. It was a little bit scary to answer questions and have to frame my thoughts a bit more coherently. I normally just had to go, wow, tell me more.
Thank you. It's really great.
Hello. Don't forget to subscribe and like the Curious Podcast. She's messing with my